everybody, welcome back. Hope y'all doing marvelous. This is part 2 of my military training series. This is going to go over the PT test for each branch. Now, just a little bit of a warning for you. This one's likely going to be a very long video. I'm of course going over all the branches PT tests and whatnot. I have Army, Navy, and Marines on the front. On the opposite side is Space Force and Air Force. Initially, I had said there was only going to be 3 parts, but there's actually going to be 4. The fourth, part of this series is gonna just kind of go over my thoughts on everything. Let's go ahead and get started, right? Now, of course, I had to write Army first because, if you follow this channel for any length of time, then the Army is the branch that I served in. So it's the branch that I have the most experience with. Of course, with the PT test, not just for the other branches, but definitely for mine, it still took some research. So a lot of my research came, of course, in the form of, just going online and, making sure I visited the right sites, .mil, .gov, if you were in government, then, .mil and .gov typically are the websites that we tend to use. But also where I live at, it's a big military community and we have all branches here, except for, I think, Space Force. I mean, we may have that here, but as far as I know, I haven't encountered anyone yet that's in the Space Force. But we have the other 4. We have all branches, Army, Navy, Marines, and of course we have, the Air Force here. So I had to go out and, talk to people who, either had just recently got out, or still on active duty and, may be able to shed some more insight. But now, just a heads up, there may be some things that I missed. If that's the case, anybody who's active duty or, recently separated, veteran or what have you, you watching this, and if there's anything that I missed or something that, I maybe am not accurate on, please feel free to jump in my comment section and let me know. I certainly don't want to misrepresent any info, and if I do misrepresent it, it's definitely not intentional. I'm going to go ahead and start with Army. With just about all branches, right, there have been changes, by the what used to be Department of Defense and is now called the Department of War. Things have changed so much. But as far as PT tests, there have been a few changes. One of them being the combat specialties, right? And this pretty much is standard amongst all branches, but the combat specialties, with the Army PT test, you can get a total of 300 points, right? That's essentially 100 points in each event. There's 2 different PT tests, right? The one that I'm used to is definitely not the one that's the Army's doing now. So that's one of the changes essentially that got made, recently. 300 points is the max amount that you can get on a PT test. You got to do a little bit more in each event of the PT test than you would if you were in a non-combat specialty. About 60 points in each event. So, because I'm about to go into the events here, but you'll notice there's 5 events, okay? Like I said, I know the whiteboard is going to be a little overstimulating. I'm trying to get better about that, but I had no choice with this one. So for those of y'all that get overstimulated looking at a board, just bear with me and try to follow me. 5 events in the Army PT test. There used to be 3, okay? When I was in, it was 3. You had push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run, right? Now the push-ups, you had to do as many as possible in 2 minutes. Same thing with the sit-ups. You had 2 minutes to do as many as you can. And then you had a 2-mile run where you had to meet a certain time. And all of those was based on your age and gender. There were certain groups, I believe 17 to 21, and then there was like 22 to 26, 27 to 31, so on and so forth. It was like every 4 years, and that's still the case, but based on your age and gender, that determined how many you had to do, in order to pass each event. Because, make no mistake, if you fail one event, you fail the entire test, and you got to do a retake, usually within 90 days. But there's 5 events, right? 60 points in each event, so 60 times 5 gives you the 300 that you need if you're in a non-combat specialty. So remember, combat specialty, you need 350. So you're gonna need a little more than 60 points in each event, give or take. The first event, and these events are in order, the 3 repetition max deadlift. That's the first event in the Army. So it's pretty much like you'd expect, right? Most people you'll see do deadlifts with, a straight long Olympic bar, what have you. In the Army, this event is done using a trap bar. So you're doing trap bar deadlifts. A trap bar deadlift essentially looks like this. You grab each side of the handle and then, bend down, you hinge at the hips, and then you grab the handles and then you come up. 3 repetition deadlift, it's in the name, right? So 3 repetition max. So it's however much weight you think you can do in 3 repetitions, right? That you think you can do 3 reps with. So if you end up struggling, from what I researched, you do get, I think, 2 more retries, right? You can decrease the weight, or you can maybe add weight or what have you. My advice is to start off with a weight you think you can do 3 times, and if it gets a little tough for you, then on the second try that they give you, you can just decrease, right? As opposed to trying to increase. It's better to start out with a certain weight, try it, and then decrease it to a weight that you know you'll be able to do, to a weight you're comfortable with. But you get 2 more tries, and if you don't get, after 2 tries you don't get it, then you fail that event. After the 3 repetition max deadlift comes, we now have the hand release push-ups. What you do is when you get to the bottom, you just reach your arm straight out each side of you, and then you go ahead and bring them back in, towards the top of your rib cage or chest or whatever, and then you go up, do a full push-up. You do as many of those as you can, and you get, I believe, 2 minutes on those as well. Now there's this one, sprint drag carry. So with the sprint drag carry event, what happens is soldiers, they'll start off, behind the line, right? And they'll have the equipment form. The equipment that a sprint drag carry consists of is they'll have kettlebells, and then they'll have a sort of a little sled with weight in it that they'll have to drag. The start position is, of course, you're behind the line and you're in the prone position with your hands, pretty much up at your rib cage as if you're gonna be doing a push-up. And what you're to do is, when the person who's running the PT test says go, or they blow a whistle or what have you, each soldier will get up and then they'll sprint 25 meters down. There'll be a line, right, 25 meters down that you have to step over, okay? It's important that you step over this line, because if not, it's not gonna count. So you wanna be mindful. You gotta do this right the first time. I mean, it's better to do it right the first time than to have to worry about a retake. If depending on, the leaders who are running the PT test, they may just go ahead and give you a warning, which is likely going to be the case. If you mess up, one time, they'll just be like, they'll give you a warning and say, hey, both feet need to be past the line, or whatever the case may be, whatever you mess up with. But once you run down, sprint 25 meters down, you'll sprint back to the start line, and then that's when you'll grab the sled with the weight in it, and you're gonna drag it back down to the 25 meter line. Make sure you and the sled is behind that line, and then turn around and come all the way back to the start line. After the drag is done with, you're gonna do what's called the lateral shuffle. So this is what a lateral shuffle is. You wanna do that as fast as you can. I forgot to mention that, but the sprint drag carry is a timed event. So you do have to do the sprint drag carry in a certain amount of time in order for you to pass. You'll shuffle down 25 meters behind the line and then shuffle back to the start line. Now when you shuffle, it's important to note that make sure your feet don't cross. Okay, otherwise you'll get a warning, and if you keep crossing, then you'll end up failing the event. It's okay for your feet to touch, right? Like, so as you're shuffling, your feet can touch each other, they just can't cross. After you have done the lateral shuffle, the next thing you gotta do in the sprint drag carry is kettlebells. So you'll have kettlebells, behind the start line. You gotta pick up the kettlebells, carry them at your sides, run down to the 25 meter line, behind the line, and then turn around and come back to the start line with those kettlebells. And it's important with the kettlebells that when you get back to the start line, you don't just drop the kettlebells. You have to place them down nicely. You can't get a warning for that. One more sprint you gotta do. So we started this out as a sprint, right? And we're ending it as a sprint. So that's what the sprint drag carry is. That's the end of the event. Whatever your time was with your age and gender will determine what time you need to meet all those events at. So that is the sprint drag carry event. It's a lot to go into. After that, you have what's called the plank, right? Now the plank is gonna, of course, measure core strength. The plank, you'll just, depending on your age and gender, you're gonna be, well actually, you know what? That's a good segue. The plank, for all branches that use the plank as part of their PT test, one of the standards or guidelines, I should say, that came from the Department of War, the plank is now essentially sex neutral, okay? It's gender neutral, so both males and females are expected to hit the plank with the same amount of time. So if you get a minute and a half plank on the male side, the women are expected to do the same thing. The last event, okay, number 5, is the 2-mile run, okay? So that part didn't change. The 2-mile run was, always a staple in the Army's PT tests. In the 2-mile run, you're just running, you do your 2 miles in a certain time frame, in order to pass, and that's based on your age and gender as well, right? So now with that, I want to say there actually was one event. It was the standing power throw. You had to take a medicine ball and throw it, as high and far behind you as humanly possible, in order to pass. Depending on the distance you threw it, that determined whether you passed or failed that event. That was a part of the PT test. It made it 6 events, but the Army effectively decided to cancel the standing power throw. Reason being is because after some research, they found that the standing power throw has a high risk for injury. There are better explosive movements than throwing a ball high and far behind you. I'm gonna also go into, at the very bottom here, I have, and actually I did this for all branches. What I did was I just chose an age for both male and female, and that age is 21. What a 21-year-old male and female has to do in order to pass these PT tests. I have a 21-year-old male and a 21-year-old female, and what their passing scores would be. For the 21-year-old male, after some research, I found that the 3 repetition max deadlift is about 150 pounds. So if you can do more than that as a 21-year-old male, hell, you're already set. If you can do more than that, if you can do, 200, if you can do 225 or whatever the case may be, 3 times, proper executions, you're hinging at the hips and you're doing everything right. If you can do that, you're great, you passed, right? But you're expected to do 150 as a 21-year-old male. You're expected to deadlift that 3 times. Also, as a 21-year-old male, you're expected in the Army to do 15 hand release push-ups in 2 minutes, at least 15. You then have the sprint drag carry, and this is the time I was telling you about. So a 21-year-old male is expected to complete all those events in the sprint drag carry that I just went over in 2 minutes and 28 seconds. Then there's the plank, right? 21-year-old male in the Army is expected to plank for about 1.5 minutes in order to pass that event. On the run, you're expected as a 21-year-old male to do 22 minutes or less. And again, like I said, if you fail any one of these events, you fail the entire test. 60 points, you can get a total of 300. 60 points, this right here, the 60 points is a passing score, right? In each event, 60 times 5 is 300. So, all of these right here for a 21-year-old male will get them the 60 points they need to pass. And conversely with the females too. So these events will give them the 60 points they need out of 300 to pass as well. 120 pounds, 3 repetition max deadlift. That's what a 21-year-old female is expected to do. In addition, 11 hand release push-ups, 3 minutes and 15 seconds on the sprint drag carry. I mentioned this already, but the plank is universal between males and females, in most branches. And then 23 minutes and 22 seconds or less on a 2-mile run, we'll have a 21-year-old female passing that. Our next branch here we're gonna go over is the Navy. And that's the Navy is the branch that is very prevalent where I live. Okay, Virginia's got the biggest naval base in the world, Naval Station Norfolk. The Navy, some of the changes that they've had, is there's now a biannual assessment. It used to be you only had to do an assessment once a year. The body composition standards, okay, and I didn't go over that in the Army, but Army, after you take a PT test, there is what's called height and weight that you have to pass. Our body composition standards is sex neutral, okay? You have to pass those prior to taking the PFT, which is the physical fitness test, of course, right? So every sailor in the Navy has to pass the body comp standards prior to taking the actual test. Combat arms, this is something else that's pretty, that the Department of War wanted all branches to make sort of universal, the combat arms specialties or occupations. They wanted, between male and female, they wanted those sex neutral. So if you're in a combat arms specialty in the Navy or even Marines or what have you, it doesn't necessarily matter anymore if you're a female. You're expected to do the same things that a male can do. The standards are the same as far as what the test consists of. When it comes to the Navy, they have 2 different types of tests, right? And if you're in a combat arms specialty, then you still take 2 tests a year, but because you're in a combat arms occupation, the biannual tests are a little different. You don't take 2 PFTs a year like everyone else in a non-combat role would. Being in a combat role, you take 1 PFT and then 1 CFT, which stands for Combat Fitness Test. So I'm about to go over how they differ here. This is what's called the PFT, right? It consists of the push-ups, plank, and a 1.5 mile run. So the Navy has 3 events, and with the 1.5 mile run, there are alternatives. And from what I understand, based on people that I've spoken to, it is unit specific. So sometimes it depends on the unit or the command that you belong to. They may allow you the choice, or they may have a commander that says, okay, everybody's got to do a 1.5 mile run. No exceptions. Everyone's got to do a 1.5 mile run, unless of course you're on what's called a chit, which in the Army we call it profiles. Like in the Army, if for some reason you can't run because you're injured, then you're still expected to walk. Even on a PT test, you're expected to walk. Okay, you got to walk a certain amount of time and distance, in order to pass a PT test. But now there are alternatives. So depending on the command, your command may say, okay, instead of the 1.5 mile run, sailors, you all get to choose what alternatives you want to do. And the alternatives are biking, rowing, and swimming. Combat fitness test is a little more tough, okay? You still have you gotta swim, you have push-ups, pull-ups, and then a 1 mile run. Here's the difference. The word that's in front of all of those events I just listed is weighted. So all of these events are weighted. So, and the weight I believe is 20 pounds. So you have to put on like 20 pounds worth of gear, whether it's a vest or a sack or whatever the case may be, or plates even. You got to do weighted, so like the swim, right? The swim is going to be a weighted swim. So you're going to be swimming in like a vest if I remember right. The weighted push-ups, same thing. You have a vest and plates maybe, 20 pounds. Same thing with the pull-ups, 20 pounds weighted. And then the 1 mile run, same thing, 20 pounds weighted. Because it's tough, you do get a little bit more leeway, as you're not expected to do as much as you would be on the regular physical fitness test for those who are in a non-combat role. Which then brings me to this. 21-year-old male, 21-year-old female. So in order for y'all to pass, right, for a 21-year-old male to pass the PFT, he has to do 42 push-ups, and mind you, the push-ups is 2 minutes, right? So you got to do however many push-ups you can in 2 minutes. But the minimum for a 21-year-old male is about 42. The plank, you get 1 minute and 20 seconds. So you have to do that in order to pass. 1.5 mile run, a 21-year-old male is expected to do that run in 13 minutes and 15 seconds in order to pass. Or they can do a 2 kilometer row, but that row has to be done in 9 minutes and 15 seconds. Or they can choose to do a 500-yard swim, but that's got to be done in 12 minutes and 15 seconds. 21-year-old female, you're expected to do 17 push-ups to pass, 1 minute and 10 seconds in plank. So it differs just a little bit. I know I said the plank was more universal. They were trying to get it as universal as possible, but there's a 10-second difference. It's not really that big. 15 minutes and 15 seconds. That's how long a 21-year-old female is expected to do their 1.5 mile run in. Or if they decide to do the 2 kilometer row, they got to do that in 10 minutes and 35 seconds. Or they can also do the 500-yard swim in 14 minutes if that alternative exists for them. Last but not least, we're going to look at the 21-year-old CFT. Now this is one of those standards I was telling you about that's universal, sex neutral, gender neutral, whatever, okay? Both men and women are expected to do this. 9 minute, 30-second swim, okay? And mind you, again, all this is weighted, 20 pounds, right? Vest, plates, a sack, whatever. This is weighted. So both males and females are expected to do this. Yo, so slight mistake on my part here. All the research I did, I guess it kind of slipped past me. But those figures on the board, they're not the actual figures. So I put up this chart right here so that y'all can see, what it actually takes to pass. So as you can see on the top portion, those are ages 17 to 24, gender neutral. The 800-meter swim, you got to do that 17:30. Push-ups 30, pull-ups 10, and then a mile run, you got to do that in 13 minutes. All weighted and still gender neutral, so both genders got to do this. Now that's passing. Now the next branch, I'm gonna definitely share some more thoughts on this one in part 4. In the Navy, remember if you want a combat arms job or role, you had to do 1 PFT and 1 CFT. Now the Marine Corps is different. It doesn't matter what your role is, okay? It doesn't matter if you're in a combat or non-combat role, you gotta do both the PFT and the CFT, once a year. So basically you're taking the test twice still, you're just doing the PFT once, and then the CFT once. The PFT is usually done between January and July, if I remember right, or January and June. It's done within the first 6 months of the year. And then the last 6 months of the year, that's where the CFT comes in. For combat arms specialties though, the scores are different obviously. Scores tend to be, like the totals tend to be different, and how much you're expected to get in each event is gonna be a little more if you're in a combat role. For the simple fact that you're in a combat role, you do gotta be combat ready. Your endurance has to be up to par, it's gotta be on point. So does your strength, core strength especially, muscular, ability and all of that's gotta be satisfied. Combat arms, right? 210 out of 300. So they're expected to get about 210 points minimum out of 300 total. That's about 70 points in each event. Because in the Marine Corps, there's 3 events for the PT test, for the physical fitness test. So in each event, 70 times 3 is 210. Combat arms roles, that's what you have to get. All other roles, you can get 150 out of 300. And that's about 50 points each event. You do want to do a little bit more, you know what I'm saying? You do want to try to push yourself and do more, you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't always want to just be that person that does the minimum. Body composition is different because it uses the tape test, much like the Army does. If you fail height and weight, that is, right? So if you end up weighing more than you're supposed to for your height, then you get taped, right? They take a tape measure your waist, neck, and all of that to get your body fat percentage. If your body fat percentage is within good standards, then you're good as far as you being overweight, so to speak. The Marine Corps started doing something a little different. If you fail a tape test, they bring in a BIA, or what's called a bioelectric impedance analysis. The BIA does essentially is it measures your body fat versus lean mass. Okay, and if you're all good there, then the tape test that's okay, that's fine. PFT, we have push-ups or pull-ups. Okay, so you have a choice there usually. Then there's the plank, and they're also expected to do a 3-mile run. So Navy was like 1.5, Army's 2. Marines got to do 3. There's a reason as to why the Marines are called a few and the proud. I'm not trying to glaze or nothing, you know what I'm saying? But the Marines, they are tough. Now the combat fitness test is a very long one. You have to meet these events within a certain amount of time. There's a 880-yard sprint on a standard track usually. MTC stands for movement to contact. So that's what the combat fitness test measures in the Marines. You have movement to contact, then you have ammo can lifts, that's the second event. The third event is supposed to simulate movement under fire. The next is the ammo can lifts. So what that consists of is you have 30-pound ammo cans, right? And the goal is to take those ammo cans and push them up, like raise them as high as possible over your shoulders. Do ammo lifts for as many times as you possibly can. I do believe that's a 2-minute event. Then there's the last event is a 300-yard course, and that's what's called movement under fire. Things that you'll be expected to do, when you come up under fire. So of course it was easy for me to do it this way. For this obstacle course, you'll start out in the prone position, and then a Marine will get up, sprint in a straight shot, then initiate low crawl, and they'll low crawl to the next cone, and then they'll high crawl to the next part of the obstacle course. And then it's followed by getting back up, sprinting again, spiraling through cones until they get to the point where they, do the battle buddy drag. So they're gonna come up behind them, and the positioning is here, right? Once they do this, they're gonna go ahead and drag their buddy backwards, and they'll drag them spirally through some cones until they get to the point where Marine is then gonna go ahead and do a carry on their buddy. So then they'll pick them up, hoist them over their shoulder, and then carry them as you see here. And then they're just gonna run as fast as they can with that buddy on their shoulder, and it should be a straight shot. Then once they get back to the start line, then they'll pick up the ammo cans that's sitting there waiting for them, and you can either hold them at your sides, or you can flex a little bit, whatever's easier for you to carry them, or you can even put them on your shoulders and run with them that way. You'll run in a straight line until you get to a point where you'll have to then spiral through the cones. And then once you get to a point, the next part of the obstacle course, the instructor will go ahead and tell you to put the cones down, and then you'll have the part of the obstacle course where you throw a simulated grenade. You're supposed to throw the grenade into some cones and get down immediately and do 5 push-ups. The person that's waiting at the end will say good, kind of like a field goal. They'll say good, and what that does is it subtracts 5 seconds off your time. If you miss, it's gonna add 5 seconds to your time. Then you'll pick the ammo cans back up, you'll sprint, then a spiral until you get to a point where it should be a straight shot. And then once you get back, that'll be it. That's the end of that course. The Marines is the only branch where, to my knowledge right now, that the combat fitness test portion differs a little bit between males and females. So the 21-year-old male, right, to pass the physical fitness test, you need 55 push-ups minimum, or 8 pull-ups if you decide to do the pull-ups in the event instead. Your plank, you have to plank for 1 minute and 37 seconds. And you also have to do your 3-mile run in 26 minutes or less. That gets you 150 points out of the total 300 that you could get. Obviously, 100 points in each event means you maximized each event. You've either done the maximum or you've done more than the maximum. 21-year-old female, so we have 28 push-ups for y'all, or 3 pull-ups if you decide to go with the pull-ups as the alternative. Plank is the same as the males. Go figure, right? Minute 37 seconds. They want the plank to be universal. Core strength, right? That's what the goal is for the plank. 29 minutes and 10 second, 3 mile or less, okay, in order for you to pass. The CFT, okay, the 21-year-old male CFT. So for the MTC, which is the movement to contact, again, as I mentioned, that's the 880-yard sprint. You're expected to do that in 3 minutes and 11 seconds. Ammo can lifts, you're expected to do that 91 times in 2 minutes. The movement under fire, which was the sprints, crawls, low crawls, high crawls, carrying a buddy, throwing a grenade and all that, you're expected to do that course in 2 minutes and 41 seconds. You're a 21-year-old female, right? Like I said, theirs differs a little bit. Their MTC, or movement to contact, 880-yard standard track, runs or sprints or what have you, they're expected to do that in 3 minutes and 57 seconds. Now you have your ammo can lifts in 2 minutes. Females are expected to lift that and do that 52 times. Your movement under fire as a 21-year-old female should be about 3 minutes and 39 seconds. One thing I did want to go over, I actually forgot this when I was going over the Marine Corps, but if you're a Marine that's 46 and older, you can alternate the 3-mile run to a 5,000 meter rowing machine. Here's the catch though, you gotta row 5,000 meters in 27 minutes and 36 seconds. But I did forget that, so I wanted to go ahead and add that part in as well. Air Force, right? Some changes. They are now, the PT test for the Air Force is now conducted biannually in 2026. If I'm not mistaken, I do believe that used to be once a year. It used to be once annually. So now it's biannually. You gotta take it twice. The Air Force and Space Force tests, they differ, quite a bit from the other 3 branches. You have to get, like the other 3 branches, you had to get a certain amount out of, like Army was 300, right? 60 points in each event, that was a pass. Well, Air Force is different. Now I wrote some examples down here to go over, but I'm jumping ahead. I don't want to do that too much. But basically, you have a total composite score of 75 points to pass. You still get 100, right? You still get points out of 100, but you're expected to get 75 points out of 100 in order to be labeled satisfactory. So here's a component breakdown of the physical fitness assessment that the Air Force conducts. C here is for cardio, okay? ST is for strength. This is core, and then that's body composition. Each of these numbers, this is how much each one is worth. Cardio is worth 50 points. Strength is worth 15 points. Core, 15 points as well, but the body composition is 20. And if you do the math, 50, 15, 15, and 20 gets you 100. So the goal is to get at least 75 out of 100. For the body composition, Air Force does things differently. They do a waist to height ratio, which is basically where they take your waist and divide it by your height in inches, right? Your waist in inches divided by height in inches, or they may use centimeters. Either way, you'll still get the same numbers. You just have to convert a little bit. There's been a change to the run as well. In the Air Force, you used to have to only do 1.5 miles on the PT test. It's now 2 miles, just like on the Army's PT test. The PFA, right, the physical fitness assessment, in order, you got 1 minute put. Now you do have options. Before I go into that, depending on the unit again, right? Just like with the Marine Corps and with Navy, it depends on the unit or the command that you fall into. They may give you options, or you may get a commander and an NCO that's like, okay, now everybody's gonna do this, right? This is what everyone's gonna do, unless of course you have some sort of medical reason as to why you can't do a certain event. Then we can look at alternatives for you. But typically speaking, we got 1 minute push-ups or 2 minute hand release push-ups. So you get that, and you also get, that's supposed to measure your strength, right? So the push-ups or hand release push-ups measures the strength portion of the component breakdown of this test. So this is worth 15 points. Now the 1 minute sit-ups, or you get 2 minute what's called cross-leg reverse crunches. You get that option as well. You do as many of those crunches as you can in 2 minutes, or you get plank time. Okay, so you can choose to do a plank, provided that your command allows it. You can choose to do the plank as part of your PT test. You just sit there in a plank position for however long you can hold it for, ensuring that you get it for long enough to be able to pass. Then you have the 2 mile run, or you have something different. You have what's called a 20 meter HAMR, which is high altitude multi-shuttle run. So you're at a start line, your foot is on that start line, and then there's gonna be a beep, right? There'll be, whoever's in charge of the PT test, whoever the NCO is that's administering the PT test, they'll hit, like a button or whatever, and you'll hear a beep, which is when you'll then sprint all the way down 20 meters to wherever that line is, right? 20 meters away, and you gotta make sure your foot touches that line. Okay, don't come up short, because if you come up short, you'll get a warning. And the way that high altitude multi-shuttle run works is if you get 3 warnings, you fail that test. Make sure you get your feet on that line, right? Now, here's something else. If you get 1 warning, right, and on the next part of your shuttle run, you don't miss the line or anything, or you don't get any warnings, the warnings reset. Okay, so obviously it's best to just do everything right the first time. That's what I always try to preach. But sometimes you may mess up or whatever, and that's good information to know. The warnings do reset if you get 1 warning, like on the first part of your shuttle run, and then as you're going, the next time you do the run or what have you, the warnings just reset. And when you come back, you'll stay there until you hear the next beep. When you hear the next beep, you'll sprint down, come back. And now here's the thing though, the beeps, they're gonna continuously get faster. Run down 20 meters and then run back to the start position before the next beep. If you fail to do that, then I believe you fail that portion of the test, or maybe you get a warning, right? Because I think there is a time in the run where you can terminate the test, but that you only want to do that if you're sure that you've made the points that you need. You have the composite scores I'm gonna go into, right? So there's 3 different types of ratings that you can get on the Air Force's physical fitness assessment. You have excellent, satisfactory, and unsatisfactory. Excellent is anything 90 points or higher. Okay. Satisfactory is between 75 to 89.9 points. And of course, unsatisfactory means you've gotten less than 75 points. Now that brings me into the examples, right? So again, as I mentioned earlier, it's not as simple as you getting a certain amount of points, like, you get 60, 60, 60 or whatever, or 50, 50, 50. Like it's not that simple. This one is a little different. I'll put up a chart here for you that I had to use in order to help me with this. But if you're looking at this chart right now, so we're going over the 21-year-old male who falls in this chart, this category of males that are under 25, of course, right? I had to play around with these numbers. This isn't like, when you change anything, if you change, the amount of push-ups, or you change the amount of sit-ups, or whatever the case may be, obviously the scores will change. But, the scores are there for you so that you can see how many points you get, right? How many points you're awarded based on how many push-ups, sit-ups, or whatever that you do. So I chose the 1 minute push-ups, the 1 minute sit-ups, and the 2 mile run. I just chose to keep it basic. I didn't choose any of the alternatives, okay? A 21-year-old male who does 60 push-ups gets 14 points, as you can see in this chart. So an airman who does 55 sit-ups in 1 minute, they get 14.3 points. Now, then there's the 2 mile run. So what I chose was the 15:28, something that was just kind of like, in the middle, you know what I'm saying? So 2 mile run, 15:28, that awards you 45.6 points. And now last but not least, there's the body composition. Now I've already done the math, and as you can see here, I'm gonna show it on this board. So we have waist to height ratio. So if you remember, waist divided by height. That's how you get your waist to height ratio. So what I chose was a 21-year-old male who, let's for example, has a 35-inch waist. So we're gonna put the 35 on this side of the division sign, and let's say that their height is, I just chose the average height of most men in this country and globally, which is 5'9". That in inches is 69. So a 35-inch waist divided by a person who's 69 inches or 5'9" gives you a 0.5 ratio, okay, 0.5. Now, if you look on this here paper that I still have up, 0.5 is it's known as moderate risk, unfortunately. Something else I'm gonna get into in part 4 because I don't really agree with this one. But you have a 0.5 ratio as a 21-year-old male, that yields you 19 points. So now that we know what all of our points is, right, we then add them together. 14, 14.3, 45.6, and 19. That's gonna give us 92.9 points, which gives us a what? If we go back up here on the composite scores, anything 90 or greater is an excellent score. That's an excellent pass. So that's what we have here for this 21-year-old male. Excellent pass. So you see now why it's not as easy to just say, get 50 points in this event or get 60 and 60 and whatever, right? Get the minimum for each event. It's not as simple as that. It truly is in the Air Force based on how many you can do, because then that will tell you how many points you get, and then at the end those points are added up. And as you can see, right, so all of this is covered. Cardio, strength, core, body composition, right? The cardio is the 2-mile run, the strength is the push-ups, the core is the sit-ups, and then the body composition. That's an excellent pass for a man. Now we go to the 21-year-old female, right? Here's some numbers that I chose off this chart, right? So I'm switching charts now to the females under 25. And for a 21-year-old female to pass 1 minute push-ups, you're looking at 36 of those, right? Well, I chose 36 for the purpose of this test. I chose 45, right, for the 1 minute sit-up. Let's say she was able to do 2 miles in 17 minutes and 3 seconds. And then let's say her body composition is 0.55. Now, 0.55 comes from a woman who has a 36-inch waist and who is about 65 inches in height. So that's about 5'5", which is around the average height of females, you know, also in the US. I think it's like 5'4", or 5'5", something like that. 36, right, waist divided by 65 inches for height gives you 0.55. That's where that number comes from. And that goes in the body composition. Now, as you can see here, right, also in the chart, I wrote it here on this line and on the board, but in this chart, a 21-year-old woman who has a body composition of 0.55 ratio is considered high risk. Again, something else I don't really agree with. I'm gonna save that for later. A 0.55 rating score is 12.5 points, as you can see here. So now we have all our points. We can add them all together. We got 13.4, then we have 12.8, 46.9, 12.5. All of those added together gives us a grand total of 85.6 points out of 100. So what that does is that gives us a satisfactory pass. Because if we go back up here with the composite scores that I wrote, 75 to 89.9 is a satisfactory pass. So 85.6 falls within that range. Play around with the numbers a little bit and you see what you get. We have Space Force, otherwise known as our guardians, you know what I'm saying? So Space Force actually was a little easier because Space Force is considered a department within the Air Force. So they essentially use the same standards with the exception of body composition. In the Space Force, they have what's called the HPA, or Human Performance Assessment, and it's conducted biannually. And with this one, you have a composite score that totals 80. Instead of 100 like the Air Force, the composite score is 80. And the reason for that is because of the body composition test. You don't score points on the body composition test with Space Force. You need 60 to 71.9 in order to pass the Human Performance Assessment. Now let's go into the breakdown of that assessment. You have cardio, strength, endurance, but the body comp, again, that's where we differ. Cardio is worth 50 points, strength is worth 15, and so is endurance. 50 plus 15 plus 15 gets you 80. Here's the reason as to why it's not 100. So you don't score points on it. You either pass the body comp or you fail it. Now here's the Guardian scale, right? If you get between 72 to 80 points, you're what's considered fit to fight, right? That's like an excellent pass, basically, you know. And then you have health maintenance, which is 60 to 71.9, which again, as I wrote up here, you need that to pass. However, if you get less than 60, you're what's called a health concern. So going back to the Space Force, you know, we have an example, 21-year-old male, 2-mile run, okay? So this is something else, right? I put this up, you know, here's another chart, but this is the Space Force's chart. It doesn't differ too much from the Air Force. It's the same way, like the calculations are the same too. So we have a 2-mile run, push-ups and sit-ups, okay? But now, again though, Space Force, their standards is similar to the Air Force. So with those events, you do have options. You know, again, depending on, you know, your unit. Instead of doing push-ups, you can do hand release, but you got 2 minutes, right? The push-ups and sit-ups, you get 1 minute on those. So let's say a 21-year-old male, as you can see in this chart, he does 15 minutes and 38 seconds on his 2-mile run. That gets him 41.3 points, as I've written here. Push-ups, I chose 60 for 14 points, and sit-ups, 1 minute, I chose 55 for 14.3. He had these 3 points, right? Totaling 80. Out of 80, he got a 69.3, which puts him in the health maintenance category, which is right here, 60 to 71.9. 69.3 is within that. So he passes the test. The 21-year-old female, I chose the 2-mile run in 17 minutes and 58 seconds. That gives our female a 43.8 points. Push-ups, and I chose 35, which gives our female a whopping 13.2 points. And I also chose 45 sit-ups, right? 1 minute sit-ups for 12.8 points. So adding all of those together, 43.8, 13.2, 12.8, we got 69.8, which also puts this female soldier in health maintenance. So they pass. One more branch I want to go over, right? The branch I couldn't fit happened to be the Coast Guard. So I got, you know, of course, a paper with me, you know, going over the PT test, you know what I'm saying, and the males and female standards. I'm going to start with the changes, right, that were made. Now, before 2026, or the changes that were made at the end of 2025 are going to go into effect July 1st, from what I've read. Some of the changes that I read were, before, you know, Coast Guard personnel didn't have to take a PT test semi-annually, or that being twice a year, unless you were a part of a tactical unit or force, rescue swimmer, or a boat crew. Those were the only people who had to take PT tests. Otherwise, you didn't have to really worry about it. The only thing I think the Coast Guard did, from what I read, was the weight and tape tests. So as long as you passed your weight and tape test, you were fine. Those unfortunately have changed. So along with everything else, there's now, of course, the PT test is to be taken semi-annually, which is, of course, twice a year. So this applies to everyone, you know. And the first change, or the first thing that they did to help initiate and form that change, was to, at the end of 2025, everybody who didn't have a PT test had to take one to establish a baseline. And those who failed, you know, didn't necessarily receive punishment, just to essentially see where they were, right? To establish a baseline and see where everybody needs to go. If you're in the Coast Guard and you're listening to this, you could of course comment and, you know, let me know if that's wrong. But that's what I've read so far. And that's gonna lead me into the standards. So for males, and you should see them up now too, for males under 30, so the PT test for the Coast Guard, it mimics the Navy's, right, in a sense. You have push-ups, sit-ups, and a 1.5 mile run, or you can do a 12-minute swim. That's what the asterisk is over by the swim. I'm not too sure about that. Maybe it depends on what you do specifically. If you're a rescue swimmer, you likely maybe have to swim as opposed to run. I know in the Navy, you know, that's typically a choice depending on the unit. Coast Guard could be the same way. But they do have all those options here. Just like the Navy, you're looking at push-ups. They've changed the sit-ups to plank. And then 1.5 mile run, and then of course you got 2 other options. Okay, there's a 12-minute swim and a 2,000 meter row. The old standard, it used to be push-ups, sit-ups, 1.5 mile run, and a 12-minute swim. So we're just gonna go ahead and hit you with the new, since that's what we're gonna be facing going forward. If you are a male and you're under 30, you're expected to hit about 29 push-ups, because these are also, I forgot to mention, the push-ups is 1 minute. Okay, so it's all about how many push-ups you can do in 1 minute. A male under 30's got to do 29 for the planks, right? 1 minute 18 seconds if you're under 30. Notice the ages, you got under 30, and then once you hit 30, it's like, within a 9-year time span. So 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 59, so on and so forth. Then you can also see the 1.5 mile run. These are the times you're expected to do that at. Obviously, just like with everything else, all the other branches and just in general in life, as you get older, you're typically not expected to do as much. It's cool if you can, but as we get older and we age, our bones tend to weaken and get a little more brittle, especially, being in the military for, this long. I actually knew some NCOs that went in that had long-term profiles, so, they didn't take PT tests or anything like that. They lucked out. So then you have your 12-minute swim, right? For males, you got 500 yards. For under 30, same thing with the 2,000-meter row. You see all the times there. Now females, okay, it's common knowledge. Most people know that males and females, our body structure is different. Males tend to be more muscular. So with that said, females under 30 push-ups, you're expected to hit 15, and then 11 once you hit 30 to 39, and then you see 9 for all the rest in 1 minute. Now then you got planks, right? Minute 9, minute 6, minute 3, minute 1, 58 seconds. 1.5 mile run, same thing, 15 minutes and 5 seconds, and then your 12-minute swim almost mimics the males, except for the 500 yards. Women they're not expected to, the females, they're not expected to swim 500 yards, you know what I'm saying? So you get 400 if you're under 30, and then it goes down from there. Then you get the 2,000-meter row. You start at 1040. It increases pretty much in 10 to 20 second increments as you age when it comes to you being a woman, and on the male side too. That is the Coast Guard's PT test. So that has been the PT test. For some of you that are considering maybe trying to co-opt this into your training, like me, because I'm just, wired that way. I'm just weird maybe that way. Sometimes I'll incorporate, some things from all branches into my training. Maybe not like the ammo cans or nothing like that. We got weight in the gym for that. But, the sprints definitely, hand release push-ups, I do stuff like that. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you feel inclined, it don't cost you a thing. And as I said earlier, leave a comment. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, make sure you hit my comment section, especially for anybody who's active duty or recently separated and, you feel as though I may have got something wrong, about your branch or what have you. Please definitely let me know so that I can correct that and put it out going forward. Y'all have a great rest of y'all day or night, whatever time it is for you that you're watching this, and I'll see you on my next one. Take care.